Welcome to Hey USA channel. Today we continue with the topic of the upcoming fight, Jake Paul vs. Anthony Joshua. This is preview, prediction and betting odds. The city of Miami is buzzing as Most Valuable Promotions MVP and Netflix present a fight card headlined by Jake Paul 1-1. 7 KOs taking on former two-time heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua to 8-4. 25 KOs in a scheduled 8-round bout live from the Casella Center. With anticipation building about how this main event will unfold, it's time to examine both fighters and determine who has the advantage heading into fight night. Jake Paul has everything to gain and nothing to lose. The show of all show has arrived in South Florida, and few can command attention like Paul can. That's why Netflix has no issues cutting check after check for a Paul event, as the last two on their streaming platform have seen record viewership for the sport. After facing mediocre opponents or ones past their prime, Paul is finally taking on a fighter who is not only active but also has the resume of facing every major name in the heavyweight division except Tyson Fury. This fight with Joshua is a win-win because Paul will be celebrated for his courage if he gets knocked out, or he'll be recognized as a legitimate contender after beating someone like Joshua. Regardless of the pressure Paul may or may not face, he's a competitor and wants to win at everything he does, which is how he's gotten to where he is today. So how does Paul pull off what appears to be a miracle on paper? Paul must earn Joshua's respect from the start, which means landing a big right hand down the middle. If Paul's power is legitimate and Joshua feels it, he can then use his left jab and footwork to maneuver around the ring and clinch at times to frustrate Joshua. The former unified heavyweight champion isn't very quick on his feet, so moving around can frustrate him and cause him to overcome it with his punches. If Paul can limit exchanges on the inside and use the full width of the ring, he can box his way to a decision victory. All the pressure is on Anthony Joshua, and that's not a good thing. It's no secret that Joshua has shown a fragile mentality, which has caused him to underperform. June 2019 at Madison Square Garden was a clear example. The pressure of fighting in New York and media obligations that came with such an event caused him to lose focus, resulting in him being stopped by Andy Ruiz. More recently, this was evident in the knockout loss to Daniel Dubois in September 2024. Now, Joshua is in a fight he's supposed to win because of his experience and accomplishments in boxing, making the pressure to perform greater than ever. If Joshua loses focus even briefly in this fight against Paul, he could face serious trouble, and the fight with Fury in September 2026 might be at risk. What does Joshua do when the bell rings to start the first round? Joshua needs to force the action and close the distance between himself and Paul. Although he might be tempted to go for the head, he can do much more damage to the body by consistently landing those big left and right hooks. Paul has a slightly soft midsection, which can be targeted to bring his arms down and set up for a devastating overhand right that could lead to a knockout. Jake Paul vs. Anthony Joshua prediction. In boxing, things that seem like sure baits can sometimes lead to outcomes that aren't quite expected. The ring size for this fight is 20 to 22 feet, slightly larger than the average 2020 ring, but not quite the largest, which would be 20 for 24. This fight feels like one Paul will simply look to survive until the last bell, and if that happens, I am leaning towards a controversial split decision victory for Paul. A different perspective. Jake Paul vs. Anthony Joshua fight. Jake Paul faces his toughest test to date as he makes a calculated business decision against Anthony Joshua. Paul's choice to move forward with this fight may have been more motivated by money. As much of the boxing world prepares for Friday's heavyweight showdown between two-time former champion Anthony Joshua and crossover YouTube star Jake Paul, it has been difficult to ignore the repeated chorus of questions surrounding the event. Will this be a real fight, or is it scripted? Is it even possible Paul lasts more than one round? And, maybe most importantly, why in the heck did Paul agree to do this in the first place? To address the former, the 8-round heavyweight bout at the Casella Center in Miami Netflix, 8 p.m. ET will very much be an officially sanctioned fight by the Florida Athletic Commission, set at a catchweight of 245 pounds to take into account that Paul, 12-1, 7 KOs competed at 200 pounds in 4 of his last 5 fights while Joshua to 8-4, 25 KOs weighed in between 250 and 255 pounds in his last 5 appearances. Whether or not Paul will make it out of the first round remains an intriguing prop bet considering the 28-year-old, who had no amateur career and turned pro in 2020, has largely competed against a smorgasbord of retired MMA stars, entertainers, journeymen and washed-up former champions. Joshua, a 36-year-old native of London who won gold at the 2012 Olympics, is listed as high as a 13-1 betting favorite and isn't that far removed from a brutal 2024 knockout win against another aspiring pugilist in former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. Paul accepted the fight against Joshua on relatively short notice after an initial November return at the same arena, also on Netflix, was cancelled when 135-pound title holder Gervonta Tank Davis, who has had a litany of legal trouble involving domestic violence, was pulled from the fight after the bad public relations surrounding a civil lawsuit filed by his ex-girlfriend accusing Davis of aggravated battery. But even those boxing fans who have considered Paul's transition into the sport as nothing more than a circus and have waited breathlessly for the chance to see him one day meet his match via are still having trouble coming to terms with the reality of this fight. "I'm about to break the internet over Jake Paul's face," Joshua said when the fight was announced in November. In 2024, Paul was heavily criticized for boxing a 58-year-old Mike Tyson and carrying him to a decision in which many speculated whether it was fixed. That was followed by a victory over a 39-year-old, lifeless and completely shot Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. So, how does Paul go from those fights to signing up to face a boxer in Davis who is 65 pounds lighter than him to now fighting Joshua, who last held a piece of the heavyweight title in 2021? Even though Joshua is fresh off of a knockout loss to Daniel Dubois in their 2024 title bout and is considered past the peak of his prime, the 6'6" slugger is built like an NFL linebacker and unquestionably still an elite heavyweight. Joshua is also currently building towards a long-awaited 2026 showdown with fellow former champion Tyson Fury. Paul's decision to accept this fight must mean he's looking to cash himself out, right? Well, that may be partially true, even though Paul is likely very motivated by the idea of silencing his more traditional boxing critics. As not just a competent fighter and consistent draw, but as a respected promoter alongside co-founder Nakisa Bidarian with Most Valuable Promotions, the choice he made in taking on such overwhelming odds against Joshua very much appears to be a business decision. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next part of the fight. Don't forget to support my channel with likes, comments, and shares.